Joining us now from Beijing, Xindo Xu is a political analyst for China Radio International. From Berlin, Matteo Garavaglia is a non-resident fellow at the Center on the United States and Europe at the Brookings Institution. From London, Alexander Nekrasov is a former advisor to the Russian government. And with us in the studio, John Sitilides is a global risk analyst and U.S. government affairs consultant. John, this was President Trump's first G20 summit. What is your assessment of his performance there?
Well, to Alexandra's point, and it's a very interesting one, we begin with the premise that Donald Trump is not a politician. And I think 6 months into his presidency, we still forget that. And the European leaders and other world leaders at G20 who haven't met Mr. Trump yet had a sense of what it is to bring somebody from outside the political orbit into the world of domestic and, in this case, international politics. So a very different type of leader representing a very different type of an American agenda. But he came in, I think, with two larger goals. One, a very pro-energy agenda and a very pro-security agenda. That may not be what many of the G20 leaders were seeking, but Donald Trump is determined to carve out what his agenda is going to be and to move other world leaders in his direction over time.
When you say he comes in as someone who is not a politician, what does that mean?
It means exactly that. Most of the other leaders at the G20 have come in through the ranks. Most of them in their entire adult lives have seasoned themselves, groomed themselves to run for higher office or to become leaders of particular parties or whatnot. Donald Trump has never had this as part of his lifelong pursuit, at least not until recent years. He's been thrust onto a global stage in a way that no one would have predicted, at least most of us who are honest, 2 years ago, let alone back in November. It's a very different type of American leadership. We're still getting accustomed to it here in Washington and across the United States. And now our counterparts, friends and foes, are having no choice but to get accustomed to this leadership as well.
John, you want to say something?
I do. In addition to injecting uncertainty and unpredictability into domestic and now international politics, I will give Donald Trump credit for also injecting a level of honesty that most of these world leaders have really discarded from much of their public discourse.
Which is perhaps why you said he's not a politician.
Well, you look at Chancellor Merkel. They talk about a more globalized international economy. But the European Union has been revealed over the last decade to be structured in a way where Germany benefits very much at the expense of the southern tier of the European Union, and it has no intention of changing EU monetary or fiscal policies in any way that would eliminate those trade imbalances. And China, as we know, pursuing a very ambitious One Belt, One Road initiative around the world, has its economy in many ways closed off to foreign investment in China without adherence to very particular nationalist regulations and guidelines.
Yeah. Very quickly, John, before we take a break, on the issue of climate change, is the United States isolated now?
Again, it's a matter of honesty, I would say, more than anything else. The Trump administration recognizes that in 2016, U.S. carbon emissions were the lowest since 1992, largely because natural gas is replacing coal, because of teleworking and whatnot. In Germany, carbon emissions went up last year. They're using lignite now when they eliminated the use of nuclear power. So Germany needs to actually lower its carbon emissions rather than castigate other countries about not adhering to an agreement that they have no intention of abiding by themselves.
John, very quickly, there has been deep concern in Europe over the United States' commitment to European security. President Trump was in Poland. That was an official visit there. He assured European allies that America is committed to their security through NATO. Do you think he's put to rest those concerns that the Europeans had?
I believe he largely has. I mean, I think a lot of the debate there was symbolic. He didn't use the right terminology when he was first in Europe several weeks ago to the satisfaction of many European leaders. I think it's also very important that he chose Poland to give this speech. One, about NATO and Article 5, so that self-defense and mutual defense is sacrosanct inside the alliance, but also in terms of a country that is on the front line, not necessarily bordering Russia anymore, but in terms of Eastern Europe and the concerns that those countries have. Poland, the newer countries in the European Union and NATO in the Balkans, and also the Baltic countries, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They remain very much concerned about Russian aggressive activities in Europe. And I think that Donald Trump going there to talk about Russian aggression and the need for Russia to scale back was very important, as opposed to doing it from Belgium or Portugal.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us.